Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and my life is fire and podcasting. And as always, I'm joined by my other mad cohort, Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing just fine. Just a blood bag over here, having a good day.
Yeah. I'm ready to witness is how we're going to start. Yes, we are going to be we're completing our Mad Max retrospective before we jump into the latest version with Furiosa, and we are going to be doing Mad Max Fury Road. In a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a woman rebels against a tyrannical ruler in search of her homeland with the aid of a group of female prisoners, a psychotic worshipper, and a drifter named Max. Starring Tom Hardy now instead of Mel as Max, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult, Zoe Kravitz, Hugh Keanes-Byrne back as Immortan Joe, and then a bunch of other people sort of coming up through the ranks. So let's start then. This was a bit of a big one when it came out. Julian, what are your thoughts then on Fury Road?
I think this is a sort of touchstone of, cinema history in a lot of ways. I think that it can be overrated.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways in which I really like Mad Max 2 and Thunderdome better than this. But having said that, it's still just a stunning film. It looks amazing. It's sort of nonstop action. And I think the thing that I admire the most about it is the lack of dialogue, the fact that the plot is so stripped down and simple. It doesn't even matter who most of the characters' names are. It's and then of course the design sense. I mean, I remember seeing it in theaters and just watching it and going, "Oh, that was designed by Brendan McCarthy." It's just like I'm a comic nerd. I know who designed some of this shit. I thought the same thing like watching Fifth Element, where I'm like, oh, Mobius worked on this.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. This has got a truly fantastic sort of design aesthetic. It's an interesting one. This is because I remember when this was. I remember them sort of like working up to this, and there's a whole hoo-ha, obviously, that Mel Gibson was going to be replaced. Mel had sort of blown it with Hollywood. He got caught drunk and said some, ludicrous and sort of stupid things, and was sort of blacklisted and ended up doing his own things and sort of been kept in a corner sort of ever since. And they were going to replace Mel Gibson, and it was kind of a big deal, like who was going to replace him. And Tom Hardy was on the rise again. I think sort of on the rise at the time. He'd been Bane. He'd done stuff, so everyone sort of knew who he was. And when that first trailer dropped, I remember seeing it. I remember sort of seeing it on YouTube the first time. That's where I saw it. I remember watching it on YouTube and just being like, oh, this could be something really like interesting. Like this is not what I was expecting. The colors were sort of incredibly vibrant. Junkie XL soundtrack was just sort of like in your face straight off the bat, and just that sort of like it's a wasteland and we're gonna have cars doing crazy stuff. And that was it. Like there's nothing in the trailer that tells you the plot. You just sort of like there's no, like you said, the characters don't really get named in the film. Like Max doesn't actually say his name until like the end of the film.
Yeah.
And Furiosa it's named sort of early on, but it's irrelevant really. Um, yeah, I remember watching the trailer and everyone was like, oh my God, like this is either going to be incredibly awesome or insanely awful. Like everyone was sort of like, it was going to be hugely divisive. Um, and yeah, just I remember sort of going to see it and being kind of enraptured by it in the sense of like, it's when I watched it, I put it on Letterbox, and all I could think of is like, there's no other film that is such a perfect distillation of a character or concept.
Hmm.
This is they've gone George Miller went back, watched the original three, and was like, what is it that I've really been wanting to do? What's the part I've really wanted to perfect? How about if I could just strip out the story and just do the end of Mad Max 2 and the end of Beyond Thunderdome and just have the chase. That's all I want. Like I don't want all the rest. Just want that. Um and it's just and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do that. That's what the film is. Um and so yeah, it just became this sort of entry point, I suppose, for sort of a practical action cinema. I mean, yes, there is CGI in here. I'm not gonna, play it, but there's an awful lot of practical stuff going on here. And it was just it comes together into something kind of special.
Yeah, and I think that it sort of is that kind of distillation of everything that from those first three, of sort of every character has a name, a backstory, and a crazy design. You don't need to go into it, there are so many shots in those first three where there's less dialogue than there
Mm.
really would be in other films. This is even more so, it, it's and the CG is wonderful. I mean, there's like CG in almost every scene, but
Hmm.
it's all done to augment the physical stuff. Like,
Yes.
um, I mean, even like the war rig, like there's every little crevice of that war rig has been designed. It looks lived in. It's doing all those things that those first three did, and then those first three have simple plots.
Mm.
Um, but it's sort of like, all right, let's distill that even further, and like you said,
Yeah.
just kind of just do the chase scene at the end. No, I have a
Yeah.
lot of admiration for this.
And I think that's partly it, isn't it? Like you say, it does what the others did well, and then strips out. It almost like learnt its lesson and was like, okay, we're going to strip out the bits of like, there's no barter town. We're not going to have the odd, humongous, monologues and all that kind of stuff. We're going to try and reduce that as much as possible. Um, and when we're just going to sort of like say focus on what works, and what works is crazy vehicles, big chase, crazy characters. Um, and it brings back quite a good cast. I mean that header, Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult. They're not Australian as we've had in the past. At the first sort of, we had obviously Tina Turner sneak away in, but like that's a strong cast. I'm a all three of those to me are strong actors that I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm happy to see any of those three on screen, and I think they give great performances. Um, and I think they got the assignment. What's weird is we're saying all this, and I just want to sort of like as a side note, is I say we're saying, they got the assignment, they understood what they were doing. Like Tom Hardy, we've said, is not. I don't think he's a leading man. I think he works great as a character actor, and that's why I think he works in this because again, it's Max entering somebody else's story. This is not Max as the protagonist. This is clearly Furiosa's story, and he's entering into it. Um, Charlize Theron, I think, is a great modern female action star. I think she's got a great presence, and she sort of commits to these things.
Well, and
Nicholas,
a great actress.
in
Period.
general,
I
yeah,
mean,
agreed.
yeah.
And the same for Nicholas Hoult. I think Nicholas Hoult actually brings real kind of like odd humanity to Knox
Yeah.
throughout this. And so, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in. This is a good cast doing crazy stuff. And then you hear the behind the scenes that they were all like, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what order this was being filmed in. Like the stuff was being filmed on the fly. Things was blowing up and breaking, and we were working on stuff. And like, I think Tom Hardy even came out and said like, this is going to be I would, if I could distance myself from it, I would, and lots of other stuff. And then he
Yeah.
apologized in interviews to George
Oh yeah.
Miller. So
Yeah, that's the other thing is that the filming of this is its own kind of touchstone in movie history.
mm,
Um, and apparently, I have often wondered about that because apparently George Miller, I mean, he had a script,
mm.
right? But George Miller was not communicating well with those actors,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
No.
clearly they hated him, but and you can imagine like I think there was an interview where Tom Hardy was talking about being strapped on the side of the big rig, the war rig, and he's strapped hanging upside down, and he's maybe upside down for a few minutes in the movie as he's kind of stuck there, hanging off of his
Mhm.
vehicle as it's cruising. He's like, I'm stuck. I'm strapped. They've got him strapped in so he can't fall, but he's still hanging off the side of a semi truck as it cruises through the desert at like 85 miles an hour.
Uh,
Day after day after day after day. And things are slamming into it. There's stuntmen rappelling on and off of it. And he's like, none of this is even in the script.
yeah.
Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Tom, take a seat. You'll be fine. Or don't take a seat. Get in the harness. Do as you're told, and everything will be fine. Yeah,
Right.
it does. There is a definite sense of chaos, but that sense of chaos, because it comes across in the film, becomes a part of the aesthetic, and I think that's obviously why it seems to work so well. Um, and like I say, that the thing I like about this is you have, like you said, about the war rig, which is a great design. I think it works fantastic, and it's again the fact it is what it is, the big rig, like it's an extension of what Road Warrior's truck, the lorry and rig out of that. And you go, yeah, that makes sense. And then you sort of see the rest, and you go, okay, well, Morton Joe's car kind of makes sense. It's got big wheels on it, so okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then you get sort of it keeps building until they're like, then we've got a truck with a bunch of speakers on the back and a guy on bungee cords playing guitar. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'm going with this. And the guitar shoots fire as he is playing. And you're just going like, considering this should be sort of like conserving gasoline at this point, like
Yes.
burning it to play
Right.
music seems insane. But you know what? It looks awesome.
Oh yeah. No, and it's just that sort of uh McCarthy design sense,
Mm,
where it looks like something out of 2000 AD.
mm.
It just, where you just say like that is a daft, stupid idea, and I love it. Like it looks amazing, and like it's insane. But even the like they have these blood bags. I mean, there's so much just staggering, amazing stuff to watch here. Watching characters climbing on the hoods of their cars to inject nitro into the engine by
Spit it
spitting
in.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much here that you just um, cannot believe that you're watching,
Mm.
and um, and then they have this society. They have these honorifics, and this sort of like religion built up around Immortan Joe. That's sort of fascinating, but again, you never really get any of this backstory. It's all stripped down to its bare minimum. It's way more interested in like just the visual and the
Mm.
coolness of it than anything. And I mean, I'm a writer, and I am constantly amazed by like the confidence that shows.
Yeah.
Like, as much as making this is going out on a limb, that is going out on a limb. It's just like, well, I mean, we've done all this stuff. We know how this works. No, the audience doesn't need this. Let's have a nearly dialogueless for film.
Well, I'd say
Um,
one of the things when I watched it this time, I thought about the plot. I really wanted to sort of focus in on that because I can enjoy the visuals now, any which way. Like they work amazingly. But what I'm really curious about is that plot. Let's focus in on it. Like, the what. Okay, so what is it I know from this film? How do I know the information that I know? So you have Immortan Joe runs his area, and he has access to water, plentiful sort of underground sort of thing of water. And in addition to that, he obviously grows crops with it, and he has a sort of a harem of women that he is using to sort of produce the perfect child. He's looking to get beyond these nuclear radiated children that he has. And but they also have this thing called mother's milk, where they are actually sort of have wet nurses that are producing milk all the time. And so the society is run around this idea of cars, and they got the war boys. And I'm going, okay, well, how do I know all that? So much of it is just visual cues.
Mm-hmm.
Like you as the viewer have to go, right, okay, well, because they call them the war pups as well. At one point, they're talking about go back to the sort of the Citadel, go back to the sort of Morton Joe's lair. And they say like, well, yeah, it'll be easy because all that's left is the war pups. And you're going like, what the hell's a war pups? And at the end of the film, they turn up. It's just a bunch of kids, like
Yeah.
young war boys, and you're like, oh, cool, all right. Well, I completely understand why this would have been easy. Yeah, you're not. There's no ex. There's so little like someone providing exposition to somebody else in this film. Like at no point there's a few times where they'll be like Max is like, where are we going? It's like we're going home. It's green, it's verdant, and you go, cool, all right, that's it.
I mean, it's literally called the Green Place,
Yeah,
right? Like, we're going. They don't call it Eden or
no,
some. This now. Even that. You meet some of the survivors from the Green Place. From her original home.
mm,
They don't say how long they've been there. Just like there's no
yeah,
backstory beyond what you need to know.
yeah, and I love it. But it's all and there's so many visual cues there. That's what I love about this
Yeah,
film. It's
you're
like
right.
then and so much is conveyed through visuals. And I don't just mean like people doing things. Um, the when Immortan Joe, for example, runs in to find that his to look for his harem of women, his breeders. There's graffiti on the wall, and there's a woman remaining. It's like their nan, like the nurse for the whole thing. And all it says on the word is like, we're not your breeders, and this other thing. Like you get it straight away. Like it's obvious, and you go, all right, cool, all right. This is all we need to know. There's no need to have an explanation as to why he's doing this. Is enough there. And they sort of do it in interesting ways of having his kids. The two that you sort of really get to know are Rictus, played by Nathan Jones, the huge guy,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to find the actor. He then has a sort of a disabled son in a sort of a chair rig. That's his eyes, and you got a couple of others, and he's like, okay, he's got kids, but like they're all something wrong with all of them. He's looking to have that sort of perfect child. And so you get why he's this sort of character that he is. It's all there. I just love it. The fact that, like, the state of a Morton Joe is shown as he gets dressed. So you get that he's absolutely repulsive. He's obviously been affected by the radiation or something. Like, yeah, you've got to
Yeah.
pay attention to this film. Like, you can pass it off and go, yeah, I can just watch this film because of the action. You go, yeah, but really, really watch this film because again, one of the things that we've credited all of the films for in the past is actually their attention to detail of how they make things
Yeah.
work. Again, that's the other thing that's taken to the nth degree with this film.
Yeah. No, and I think that is incredibly powerful. One of the things that you mentioned is sort of like how this is Furiosa's movie.
Mm.
And going into it the first time, I knew that. And I knew that was one of the criticisms of the film was like, well, Mad Max fans are annoyed. But that again is taking what the first three movies are doing to a greater extreme, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like it's not he's the guy who wanders in, and it's real. He wanders into other people's stories in progress,
Mm.
and I have to say how blown away I am by the beginning of this film. Um, Max is sort of standing by his car, and there's a scorpion, which is then murdered, not murdered, I mean, stepped on, killed, right? And then he sees cars approaching. There's a brief chase, his car flips, and suddenly Max is a prisoner.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that happened very quickly, and he's a prisoner for like the next 30 minutes.
Mm.
He's like strapped to the front of a car for like the next 30 minutes that you see him. Um, and I think, my God, that's brave. I think that displacing that main character, giving him nothing to do and almost no dialogue. I mean, like, these are mistakes. These are serious problems with the movie, and yet they all work because you're so entranced with everything that's going on, and it's sort of like, yeah, we have your Mad Max. I mean, you're going to see some Mad Max stuff, but we're going to upset your expectations
Yeah.
here. But again, exactly in line with those first three films.
Mm. I agree. I can imagine Tom Hardy sort of signing his contract. Yes, I'm going to be Mad Max. I'm going to be the new, Max Rokitansky, and you're just sort of like, cool, cool. You are going to spend an awful lot of time either strapped to the side of a truck upside down or the front of front of a car, uh, you know, driving at say like 80 miles an hour with a garden fork welded to your face. So
Yes. Yeah. You
enjoy.
know those, all right, I signed the contract. Well, who's Max gonna kill in this movie, George Miller? Well, you remember Mad Max 2, those guys who were like strapped to the front of
Yeah.
vehicles? You're gonna be one of those guys this time.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and that's why I think this is a distillation. This is like Mad Max in its purest form. Um, and it's also why I think it couldn't have been Mel Gibson
Yeah,
because of
it's
the
true.
age things as well. Um, because like one of the things that we got on, we talked actually about the story that was built up, the backstory and the connective tissue that was kind of built up around the first three films about how the first one happens during the fall. The second one is sort of slightly after the oil wars, but not really like a nuclear post-apocalyptic world. But the third one is like the fall went even further, and the rest of the world has really sort of gone, mad, and the nukes have dropped. This is not. I don't care what anyone says. To me, at least, this is my. This is nothing to do with that continuity. This is a completely separate continuity. This is almost not. I wouldn't say it's a reboot. This is just sort of like almost. We've said about Max being this legend.
Yeah.
This is just another story that like we're being told out of order. Like this could, as far as I'm concerned, this could have happened between one and two. Um, you
Yeah.
know, I don't care. I don't
I mean,
care. I don't care when it happened. It's just not in that real. This is just a legend that's been told about Max, by somebody.
so yeah, I mean, I like things being in their own continuity. I like things being in large universes, but I also am not bothered by minor continuity
Mm,
problems. Um, if anything, I'm more bothered by recasting than I am,
mm,
continuity problems. Um, you know, in my, I would say that this does show more fallout damage, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
more time has passed than three. The only reason there's been any kind of nuclear war is that one line about fallout in three,
Mm,
right? About the water. So here, clearly, this is a world where not just everything's desert and climate has really changed, but also characters are dealing with radiation damage.
mm,
Um, and so you see much more of that in this film. So I would say that this does seem to be a little bit of a progression. Um, but I can't imagine being bothered by uh, oh, the cars are models that didn't exist
oh
when,
yeah, yeah,
like, who gives a shit, man? Like, they look old,
yeah, and
like,
awesome.
yeah, exactly. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, sit there with like an automotive book and go like, well, this car was released in 1987. That was clearly after the apocalypse and continuity. What about that, George Miller? Um, no, they look old and used and designed awesome, and who gives a shit?
Yeah, that
So
bit
to me,
that's
this
not
is
bothering,
like,
but
it definitely is. I know what you're saying. It definitely is a kind of like quasi reboot, but um, I don't know if you want to get into the theories there.
Well, let's cover a few of them because I think it is fun to do. Because I know you sort of, I don't know if we talked about it on the show or
Yeah.
off air, but you highlighted one we talked about previously. I don't know if you want to sort of start with that one and
Yeah, and I like this idea. So, there's a theory that, the kid from the Mad Max 2, who they go to
the
the
feral
north.
child. Yeah.
Yeah, that basically he grows up and says, "Well, I'm going to start being Mad Max, right?"
Mm.
And adopting this legend, this guy who saved us. And then, that's Thomas Hardy, right? Um, and I will say, like, watching it with that in mind, I really like that. The only thing that I think really contradicts that is at the beginning, the line about like I was a cop, there's a little bit of that dialogue at the beginning that sort of suggests it's the same character. Um, he, for example, he's got flashbacks through the whole movie toward, with a bunch of people who he couldn't save. Well, who are those people?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
not from the first three. This is a different Mad Max. If it is the same guy, he's been through an additional experience. Why didn't you mention that in the beginning? So that could be the people who he grew up to lead, as they died,
Mm.
and he couldn't save them. Something happened. I really want in addition to the Furiosa prequel, I want the prequel to this that's following that wild child, as he loses everything and, you know, gets a car and is like, I have nothing left to do except take the long walk into the wasteland, and
Well,
supporting that, he says, you said he doesn't say his name until the end. This could be his first adventure as
mm.
Max,
Well, I
that,
think this. I think you're right. I do want to back up this theory, um, in one particular way, because we are talking about the feral child, from two, and let's say he then goes off and he grows and he's educated and becomes a bit less sort of Tarzan, um, and then, but the point is at the start of this film, when he's there and you say like he puts he sort of catches that lizard and he eats it, off his foot. He's pretty feral.
yeah.
This there could be quite you can say that actually this is almost like a reversion um of this thing, and that thing of like I was a cop kind of thing, and that all that gravelly tone thing. It could be just part of the legend that he tells himself. This is the legend that goes with it. This is the Robin Hood legend. This is the King Arthur legend. This is just like it's been retold and retold. Um, maybe, but I like the fact that because this is about people regaining their humanity. This film is about regaining humanity, and we'll get into that in a bit. But that to me sort of works, And then, like you say, he doesn't say his name's Max until the end of the film. It's my name's Max, and that's a lot of sharing some information and stuff. And it does add to the timeline where you're like, okay, well, the Mel Gibson Max went up to a time, and then that kid grew up, and this is sort of post Beyond Thunderdome, but like it's a younger version of this Max, and he mimics the car. So he's obviously come across a sort of an interceptor at some point and gone like, all right, that's what I remember from the legend. So the interceptor is part of the legend and all this other stuff. So it could work. I could see that because it feels like almost like a cosplay because he hasn't got his legs not in a brace or anything. But he's got the jacket
Yeah.
with the shoulder pad and stuff on it. So is it So I like this idea because it then fits with the timeline and stuff. Because I agree with you about the flashbacks as well. Like he sees an Aboriginal guy at one point, and then he sees a young girl. And at one point, I was like, "Is the girl supposed to be his daughter? Have they reframed his origin? It wasn't a baby; it was his daughter." But she doesn't call him dad. She says, "Max, why couldn't you save us?" So yeah, I'd like this idea that maybe there's a tragedy behind this, and it was that tragedy that drove him back into the wastelands and drove him feral again. And this is what sort of brings him back out, having to engage with what's left of humanity. I'm kind of
Yeah.
sold it now.
I
I didn't like it before, but yeah, you sold me on it. There you go.
I want that prequel movie, man. I
Mm,
want I want these side stories so much to Max, and the fact that we're getting Furiosa, it's like a prequel to this, following her
mm.
story, is awesome. But I want, the follow-ups to all of those different points of civilization from the Mad
Yeah,
Max 2 and 3, you know, like,
yeah,
and the one for 2 is the feral child, and that would lead directly into this,
mm,
as at the end, you don't know that it's a Mad Max story until at the end he becomes Thomas Hardy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you could do it. That'd be quite cool, actually. I would like to see that. Because they're calling them like Furiosa's called a Mad Max saga, or the Mad Max
Yeah.
saga. So yeah, build on that. Like, I want to see more of that. Um,
What are the other theories?
so the theory is it's just a reboot. Is that
Yeah.
it's a reboot? One of the theories I saw that is actually that this exists between some of the other films because he's obviously got his interceptor and he loses his interceptor in two. So is this actually him post the death of his wife? So is this sort of like something between one
Hmm.
and two? Um, and there may have been something else. There's other things people he didn't save, obviously as a cop. So could it have been those people? Um, but everything
Yeah.
feels too, as you said, everything we've already got radiation and stuff going that, and it feels more. This
Yeah.
feels like post two, right? If anything, um, so I don't know.
It
It
feels
just feels,
post 3 to me too. I mean,
mm,
3 seems, like basically things are the same compared to this. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
this is a
I mean,
further evolution.
if they wanted to do it, and if this had been, if Mad Mal hadn't gone off and said those vile things, I wonder, like, how would this film stack up? Because obviously Tom Hardy's younger. He's obviously a bit more, he's in shape. Not Mel Gibson in his whatever he's in now. He's clearly in better shape than I've ever been in. So I can't diss him for that. But he's an older guy. You'd have that you'd have it slightly different. But I do think there'd be a different tone to the film, and not just the craziness. I think the craziness would be there. Um, but I think there'd almost be, instead of like the relationship between Max Furiosa and the
Hmm.
the pregnant women, Splendid and um all the rest of them, would be different. I think it would almost be like there'd be almost like a fatherly relationship rather than sort of like there's a partnership. There's no relationship between Max and there's no sort of like sexual chemistry or anything. It's not a romantic relationship in the slightest. It's a partnership. But I think that it would have played differently if it was Mel Gibson playing Max. And there's a part of me that kind of would have liked to have seen that this was past Beyond Thunderdome and
Hmm.
it was another sort of like 15, 20 years after that and he's still about. I don't know. I kind of would like to have seen that if it was in continuity.
Yeah, it would be a very different movie though.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
I mean, Mel Gibson's not going to be fighting guys on the top of a big rig, in the same way, not flipping around the side of,
Mm.
the cars and everything.
You don't know. I mean, like, I'm sure George Miller could have talked him into some things, and he has done bits and pieces through his career, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I missed the scene where he goes 1-to-1 through the harem and asks them if they're Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't go well, and it wouldn't have been, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it needed to be Tom Hardy for this to work, or at least someone of Tom Hardy's age for this to have been sold, and also for it to work as a film. So to me, it's sort of I like this idea. If you want to keep it in continuity, this is someone continuing the legend of the Road Warrior. Um,
Yeah.
you know, in that vein.
Yeah, I like that, and it's kind of like a stealth way of doing that legacy thing,
Mm,
because so often we have these actors who age out of roles, whether it's Schwarzenegger or just in superheroes where they want to replace them, they're asking for
yeah,
too
yeah.
much money, and there's this problem of passing the baton, and
Mm,
I know this is one of your most cherished subjects of kind of like how these legacy movies
mm.
do it. And here we have an example of a legacy movie that does it, but it does it by just kind of recasting. And if you could kind of backtrack that and say, well, the reason why he's not giving his name is because, and we've always talked about Max as a legend, right? He's a different guy.
Mm.
And we've gotten you to go to the movies based on, Tom Hardy, sort of recasting. But in fact, there's been a passing of the baton. We fooled you. We're already into the new actors,
Yeah, yeah.
tenure.
Yeah, and
That
we
would be
don't
quite
know,
an effective way of
in,
doing
in
it.
in this case, in this, I'm gonna say it's never gonna happen, but you could have it like you would go, oh, this Max has gone off, he's grown up, he's had his own tragedies, and he's becoming the Road Warrior. But the Mel Gibson version still out there,
Yeah.
or dead,
Yeah.
or whatever. Like you don't know, could be either way. Um, so yeah, I like all that. I do like those, that idea. Um, let's get into some bits around the actual sort of the film, not just the film. We've talked about the plot. I think the plot is minimal but well structured. There's something in this. There's some themes in this film that I think are interesting. That again, we talked about this idea of capitalism and the sort of the holding of power between Auntie Entity and Master Blaster in Beyond Thunderdome. And again, how sort of like laws and everything were sort of shrunken down into sound bites and all that sort of thing. So there has been this, I say, ideas in the past. This one feels again a little bit more refined in a sense of going like, we're going to have we're getting onto the message. The fact that you have there are three um towns, like there are three settlements within a certain distance of each other that sort of like trade with each other. We've got a Morton Joe that has water. Um, we have Gastown, which is obviously like a pump of some kind, which is a well, or it does oil refinery, and then we have Bullet Town. So we
Yeah.
have these three settlements, and to me, I was just like, oh, okay, so Watertown, but also he has the women there who've been breeding. He's looking for sort of to grow the population. Da, da, da. I was like, okay, so you're talking about you're talking about big oil, military industrial complex, and the control of utilities, but also the use of religion to control production. The growth or the birth of children.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. I hadn't spotted that. I hadn't really thought about it in that way until watching it this time. And I was like, oh, this film is really all over sort of like social messaging, like the War Boys and everything are just sort of like, I was like, oh, War Boys, that's kind of like Proud Boys and all this other stuff. And so I don't know,
Well,
am I
they do
far
have shaved
off?
heads.
Yeah,
No, no, you're right. I hadn't thought about that with the sort of like the barter thing, right? I mean, because they kind of mention these other towns, but we don't
Mm,
really see them. Um, you sort of see other settlements that they pass, or groups. But no, you're right about that. And I think the control over reproduction, religion having a role in that is obviously a little on the nose.
hmm
As we are in a post Roe versus Wade reality here in the United States, and as the southern United States seems intent on recreating The Handmaid's Tale as quickly as possible. Um, it's truly surreal. But and that fits with the larger themes of sort of feminism and what this movie has to say about gender, that I think are more complex than people think. I think that there was a backlash that um, Mad Max was not the main character
hmm
um, at the time this was released. But I don't remember a huge backlash about like, oh, another woke movie. I don't think this could be made today. I think
No.
today this would have a very different reaction,
Mm.
and it would be it's like all the people who think like, well, get your politics out of Captain America. He was conceived as like a Jewish
Yeah.
hero who like
Yeah.
beat up Hitler. What are you talking about? Mad Max was always political. But all of those kind of fanboys would come out and
Yeah.
denounce this, and then they'd say it wasn't a success, and it's a female-led movie, and that's why it didn't do well enough, and mean, it would become so enmeshed in this kind of stupid politics that we have
Can we
now.
just say, right? Let's say everything you're saying right now is being applied to Furiosa.
God.
They're all there going, oh, Anna Taylor-Joy, she's, this is it. This is, it's going to be a mess. It's a female lift and no one wants this. And I'm going, no, I wanted this.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Um, so no, I agree.
Well, but I also say that I think that this is sort of like less feminist, less kind of card-carrying feminist than other fans think.
Mm.
That, first of all, I mean, there were many times, every time I've watched this, I've thought there is an element that makes you say, like, right, notice how everybody has all these unbelievably complex costumes, and all of the harem like have like little sheets of white,
Yeah.
white linen. You know, this is kind of an excuse to have scantily clad, unbelievably,
Supermodels.
young, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bunch of supermodels sat in the back of the car and then paraded around. And they get wet. The fact that they didn't cover them in water at one point, and again watching, I was like, oh, oh yes, okay. Yeah.
Well, and see, I like this combination.
Mm.
I I am, I am somebody who will say, look, um, I have problems with, obviously, everybody listening to this knows my politics, right?
Hmm.
I don't exactly hide it. But I'd also say, like, the real haters and the real propaganda pieces, that we've had in cinema of sort of like tough guy, you need a white man to solve all the problems. That stuff bothers me. On the other hand, that is an entirely different type of movie than like a Michael Bay ass shot. If
Hmm.
you want to do a Michael Bay ass shot, that is a legitimate thing. Half of Western art is, women who are drawn to be beautiful,
Yeah.
according to the standards of the time. This is not new. That is not misogynistic. Just having that doesn't automatically mean that you think all women are objects. You know, um, it, you know, I do think that you can go too far in that direction. And this is a movie that kind of it keeps its edge. And
Yeah.
I like that I'm a little uncomfortable at the depiction of those women. I like that, like, they're part of a set piece. And, I like that there's a kind of like edge to this where, yes, it's a story about Furiosa and it's a story about women, and most of the characters, most of the good guys are women.
Mm.
On the other hand, it's not a movie that is afraid to have a little titillation or have a hard edge to it, or, it's not trying to present some kind of carefully orchestrated, careful message in that respect. But it still is a female empowering message. And I think that is, that's my world. It's a rough and tumble world. You're going to have to deal with ideas you don't like. You're going to have to deal with people you don't like. The history of the world is one of, men owning women. I mean, that
Yeah.
is just the
Well,
history of the world.
I think one of the things.
But that doesn't mean we can't do better.
No, and I think you're right. I think this film. I like that you say it has an edge. It makes you feel uncomfortable. I think it almost challenges you to though, because that's one of the things that this film does throughout is um the characters are there to sort of make you feel. I think even the casting at time you sort of go like for example, I'll talk about Nicholas Hoult as Nux. You know, you go like, oh yeah, I'm not used to him playing this. He's kind of he becomes sympathetic, and throughout it you become more sympathetic to Nux because he's clearly like brainwashed, and he becomes less brainwashed. But and we'll build. He obviously has his final sacrifice, which is kind of, and I want to talk about that in a minute because what this film does, it keeps throwing things at you, and you're a bit like, oh, I'm not sure how to feel about that character. And then you write about this sort of the titillation of the women, the gays, in this sort of sense. You've got these four beautiful women, sort of like supermodel. You've got Zoe Kravitz and these are the supermodels. Well, part of the point is it's sort of like it shows you them, and it's basically saying, but you're no better now. Watching you're no better than Immortan Joe, and you're going like, yeah, all right, thank you. And then once they do get to meet the other women that survived the Green Place, that obviously is no longer there. That's been irradiated and is sort of like turned to a wasteland. But those sort of women, the older women, again, at no point is it like is age a factor in this film because they're older women, but they're not like, oh, you're unable to fight off the war boys, or oh, but you're old. That like it's just like, well, you survived in in this wasteland for however long. Like you're the last survivors. You're pretty hard bitten, but they haven't lost sort of like the hope. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of like yes, they use themselves as bait, but you have one of them has that bag full of sort of seeds, and she's like, I keep planting them. Like they never take, but I keep trying. Like we are gonna find somewhere, and the fact that that gets passed on to one of the women, you because they're the many mothers, and that's one of the things I like about this is that they because Furiosa has come from this place called the Green Numbers, the place of the many mothers, and by the end of the film, you realize that, oh, she's rebuilding the green place with the many mothers.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's this idea of not just rebuilding, but like the feminine and the women, like they can be hard and they can be tough and they are survivors, but they don't have to be like butch to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not like there's not sort of like a emasculation of all the women in order for them to be able to do what they're doing. They just sort of do it, and no one sort of goes, "You can't do that. You're a woman." It's you know, it just sort of happens, and I kind of like that it is just they're just yeah we're going to do it. But on the flip side, what I would say is that they don't become overly. I'm going to say anti-men. That sounds misandrist, or whatever. But that's not the point. They're not so stuck on the message as you say that when Max actually comes back because they get to this place they have this plan then they've got the bikes they jump on the bikes that the women have survived on and they're going to go 160 days across the salt flats and Max is like good on you bye again as he always does the contract's done I've done my piece
Yeah.
I'm off but he turns around and actually he stops them and says if you go 100 days that way all you're going to find is more wasteland. And not one of them says, "Why should we listen to you?" They're clearly
Right.
like, "This guy knows the wasteland. He's and he says the only way to go is go back to Immortan Joe's place." And it's a team. They listen. There's not that thing of going like, "We're not listening to you because you're a man," or We're not listening to you because of whatever." It's like, no, that makes total sense, and we could do it. I don't know. It feels even-handed throughout, and
Yeah.
intentionally or not, I don't know, but it's sort of empowering, but like sensible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that you have one of the women who's been kept by Immortan Joe is a traitor. And
Mm,
so I mean it's not like they're all perfectly upstanding, people. And obviously Furiosa is a badass and she's a better shot than Max, which, I can see how, if you're a Max fan, maybe that's not your favorite scene. But the point is, these women are very competent. They're not looked down on for their age. They're not,
mm-mm.
there's no discussion. Certainly, they don't sit around talking about men. They don't
Yeah.
sit around, missing the men who are not part of their civilization. Um, but I agree with that kind of even-handedness that, Max is valued. Um, they're able to uh, treat. There's one line where they sort of are not sure about Max, but then they accept Max and Knox is, oh no, he helped us.
Mm.
He's an ally. He's a good one. And then they don't make a big deal out of it. And the women are tough, the men are tough. But what it makes me think about is sort of two different outlooks on sort of what you would do in the state of collapse. Where like Immortan Joe and to a lesser degree some of the other movies kind of uh, suggest that there'll be a reversion to earlier mentalities.
Hmm.
And, obviously somebody's going to, in a warlord kind of society, say, these resources are mine and also these women are mine. And that is pretty realistic, I would think.
But
Um,
it's a feudal system, isn't it? Really, you get your barons and your lords, and they become sort of like they control their bit of turf, really.
right, and that women are treated as a resource, and
Mm.
that the whole mother's milk thing, is right up that alley, right? Which looks like something out of Meta Barons, you know,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
you know is amazing. But then the female society sort of suggests something else, which is like, no, I mean, we are in a society with guns. Women can use guns just as much as a man can,
Mm.
right? It doesn't matter whether you are, you know, a strong man or not, right? Indiana Jones can kill the ninja with a gun, you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. In a world with guns, fetishizing, as I've always said, you know, fetishizing muscles is a little stupid. Um, post guns, post machine guns, certainly
Mm.
this is a weird thing. And those women sort of represent a kind of untapped potential. And you know, and this is what always, you know, what always gets me when we think about these arguments about, you know, race and gender and, you know, trans identity and everything else. Um, all you have to do is see those women and say they are capable, they should be able to add to the society. Society scraping by. We need everybody to fulfill their full potential. You're not using people to their full potential in, you know, these segregated kind of societies. Um, and you know, that's always a sort of very practical mentality, but it's a very practical reason why, you know, I am so hostile to, you know, sexism and racism
Mm.
and homophobia and all of this, because we gotta get society, we gotta get off Earth, we gotta make sure this is not our future, and the way you do that is
Yeah.
tapping everybody's full potential.
Yes. Yeah. Band together, and that's what
Yeah,
it
so I
feels.
think it's
Go
sort
on.
of like a counter argument to the,
Mm.
you know, a different way of kind of dealing with apocalypse, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, you look at, we talk about the way that those different towns, or we only really know how Immortan Joe's sort of little plot of land works. He obviously controls the water. There's a great scene when you see him all being, he's been built up, he's getting his armor on and all this other stuff on, or whatever it is, and then he's presented to the people, um, and he pulls the levers, and the water comes gushing out, and the people are rushing down to collect it in buckets and things. And he has the line, he says, Don't get addicted to the water. You'll become bitter of, you'll resent its absence." And I was just like, yeah, you're gaslighting the crap out of these people, but it's a great, way of being like, oh, don't you you're getting addicted to water. It's a real problem. And you're going like, no, we're gonna need it. But like, I love that thing, isn't it? Where you go, it's not being equally shared. Because then there's the scene when he then runs through to find that his breeding stock has gone. You see, there's like some sprayers constantly spraying a bunch of crops and stuff. So the water's being put to use, just not for the people at the bottom. Um, but but there's none of this makes sense to him, or it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things. Yes, he wants to create a perfect child, and you have a scene later where one of the women is killed, and they find the child could have gone to come to term and would have been perfect. But who's that gonna breed with? A
Yeah.
society needs people to breed, and he's treating these people like crap. It's sort of it doesn't this that thing, isn't it? And it's this way. It's again almost like a statement on the current system where it's like, yeah, you want us to be subjugated, but you kind of need us to sustain society. You got to give us the water. Um,
Yeah. And you know, and without pushing it too far, I mean, I find like even I love the don't get addicted to the water, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, uh, this is an addictive substance. But, you know, all the pseudoscience that we have going around now, you know, about vaccines and everything, it feels, you know, more prescient than ever. Um, but this is, you know, you talked about like the role of religion, you know, I mean, this is part of that sort of like religious myth making, the promise
mm,
of Valhalla.
mm,
Um, you know, yes, your life is one of suffering at the base of these, you know, cliffs, these sort of mesas
yeah,
um, that have access to the water. which is I love this sort of design there. Um, but it's really that religious element that kind of keeps people saying, "Well, that's our lot in life." Well, he doesn't have to share. He squirts some water at us, once in a while. Like, we're really quite lucky, aren't we?
Mm.
That is very much like what people seem to say, who are okay with the system. Um, and then there are the people who aren't okay with the system. We don't really see too much of those people down there, but they know they don't have any power to change it, which again is sort of where we're at.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, this film has a few of those moments. I think there's one other that I wanted to sort of like to point out in a similar way because I do like that. The thing there's one more later on. One of they bring people in to track down um Furiosa and everything. They bring in sort of like war parties as they call them from Bullet Farm and from Gastown. And the Bullet Farm is obviously like where they make all the ammunition and the guns, and their sort of leader is gun obsessed, and the guy from Gastown is sort of like again, he wears a suit. I love the designs are great, but he's like this big guy, got a brass or gold nose, and then he's got like nipple rings that have like chains between them, but then the chain goes off to a pocket watch. Like just some fantastic, like bizarre, like, interesting stuff. But at one point, like the main guy from the Bullet Farm, the Bullet Farmer, um, rides off ahead of everyone to try and track. He's like, I'm on board of this. He says, "Why are we doing this?" He calls it a family dispute, which I think is a great line. It's like, all this hassle for a family dispute. Like, why the fuck are we bothering? And he drives up and he gets blinded. Furiosa blinds him. And but then you have it, and he has a blindfold on, and he has two guns, two massive like Joker-esque kind of guns, and he has this. He says, as he's riding forward, ready to just open fire, he says, "I am the scales of justice, conductor of the choir of death. Sing, brother heckler, sing, brother cock, sing, brothers, sing, sing." And again, there's this thing of like, I said, I know justice is blind and this other stuff. And again, this thing of like, but justice, instead of having a sword and a scales, which is, the idea of balance but with power, this time it's like, no, both hands carry guns. And so I'm not saying it's a big message, but it's kind of there. And I'm going, oh, George Miller's throwing these little breadcrumbs out, and going like, no, I've got something to say. I may have made Happy Feet and Pig Babe in the City, Babe Pig in the City, but I've also got some feelings on the way the world is going.
Yeah, that sequence stood out for me as one of the strangest in the movie, and it does feel sort of tonally like something out of Sin City
Mhm.
or The Spirit. Like it's a little over the top there, as he's shouting with these machine guns on the back of the ATV kind of thing. It does feel like a little tonally
Yeah,
different than the rest of the movie. Um,
which goes
you
to
know,
what, which does go to what Tom Hardy was saying about the way it was filmed.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about how, they're the leaders of those other towns, and he sort of seems to have maybe his own mythology that's sort of reflected there. That each of these towns has its own little subculture.
Mm.
Um, I wonder what's going to happen to those towns with the leaders gone.
Well, it becomes like a
Is
power vacuum, doesn't
Furiosa
it?
going
Yeah.
to take them over?
Send other people out to sort of take control. She's got the war boys now. She's got some of them at least. Um, she has killed a Morton Joe. There seems to be this thing of like, if you kill the leader, you take their place, kind of thing. So quite possibly. Um, so yeah, I don't know, but there's little moments like that that it definitely says um, that this has got there's some satire in here to sort of to be made. Um, but you are going to have like also have the insane sort of action and stuff that we're going to have. Um, we talk about how totally different that scene is. Just something that is worth noting is how this film looks. Um, and you said about Sin City and there's other things like this film was done. I watched this in parallel. I watched the color version, which is my preference. I think it looks great. I think it's insanely colorful, brightly colored. The use of the color powder firework things and a bland, it should be a bland landscape desert is beautiful and incredibly well shot. Um, and then they did the chrome version, black and chrome, which is the sort of black and white version, which was a thing and seems to be a thing for certain films. So like they will have a black and white version. And you go, all right, like they did it with Logan, they did it with this, they did it with Justice League. And you sort of watch it and you go like, yeah, all right, fine. It looks. There are certain scenes that look good in black and white, but then there are scenes when like when they are going through that wasteland and what the bogs and all the crows and the
Yeah.
bit with the bullet farm where I'm going like, no, the blues and the purples and stuff in that
Yeah.
is the point. Like it looks beautiful. Like some of the scenes in this are like paintings about how good they look.
Yeah.
And also like the distance things when you have the landscape and then you have the trucks and the cars piling in and all the dust coming up. I'm like, no, this needs to be in color. Like this is so textured in that color, and the way it's shot and the gradation they've given the sort of the I'm assuming it's done in digital, but like the gradation they've given it. Some of it, I honestly think some of it's kind of lost in the black and white version. Um, some of it adds in some parts, but definitely I think the color version is the right way to watch this film.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like I like black and white. Obviously, you and I watch black and white movies.
Mm,
I like black and white, but I'm with you. I mean, so much work has been done to make it colorful and vibrant. Um, and that's lost. And I think that, in part because Miller, has a love of black and white, he's paid extra attention to making sure that the color is working and makes sense. Um, and I'm with you. The other thing I would point out about the color is I am such a huge fan of texture in films. And I
mm,
don't mean kind of like Wes Anderson sort of texture of stuff that you're shooting, but of just having um, an awareness of the fact that everything in movies is artificial, right?
yeah,
Um, it is not a window that you're peering onto a stage of a stage play. Um, it is like a canvas, and every choice that you make, audio or visual, is a conscious artistic choice. And I love having texture there of, overlapping music and audio and, weird shots and weird angle shots and, weird filters and making um, those choices based on what is best for the particular shot. And I think, this is partly why I love, say, like Natural Born Killers so much.
mm,
That, it's switching from animation to like black and white to,
yeah,
weird angle shots with weird filters on them. Overlaying music, I mean, it's like one long music video. I love that kind of stuff. And this has so much attention to that. And the color is part of it. But the other thing is that George Miller in editing went over and sped up or slowed down every single shot.
yeah,
And, apparently his rubric was like, if there's something that you're not quite catching as an audience, slow it down a little bit just so that the audience can, pick that up. And on the other hand, if it's just dragging a little bit, you just speed it up a little bit. And it's amazing, why others don't do this.
mm,
It's amazing to me how effective that is. That's exactly that kind of natural born killers thing that I'm talking about. It is it is not a window that you're watching the world on. It is always mediated. It is always an artistic choice. And so much of this movie, you see, even when not Mel, Max is, running away from,
at the beginning.
the right. You see, oh, this is clearly sped up. But it works.
Yeah,
And the same thing, all those stunts, it's like, well, how unclear would this be if it wasn't slowed down just ever so slightly so that we can pick up that detail? And I think that is such a huge part of why this movie works.
mm.
And kudos to him for doing that. And it's something that I think really every director should do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that opening scene was a you know that chase, I think, in within Immortan Joe's den, when sort of like Max has been tattooed on the back and they're about to brand him, and he tries to escape and runs, was a real sort of standout point. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's weird. It's weird. It's been sped up." And when you watch it, you are sort of going, "Yes, it has." But it's like, not only does it sort of get through that chase scene quickly, as you say, because it doesn't really they want it there, but they're like, "Yeah, but that's not the point. Move on." But it adds to that sort of like the madness, the craziness, or the chaoticness of this situation. Like, it feels at odds with itself. They're running through. It feels almost like comedic, but as he runs through and sees they're stripping his car and they're doing this other stuff, like there's just a sort of like, it's the panic of the situation. Like, it's clear, like you're almost like you're in Max's head, going like, oh, what the hell's going on? I've got to get out of here! Like, run! It's like an adrenaline boost, and so you feel that in the film. And again, like later on, there are moments to say that slight slowing down, or even more slowing down when some of the stunts are going on. That you sort of, it becomes um breath. You're holding your breath at some of the stunts. Like, there are moments when like Max's or even some of the stuntmen's head are like, I don't know, centimeters away from the floor as they're going along, and I'm like, that could clearly have gone very wrong. So yeah, I love the pacing of this film, visually as well as sort of narratively. Um, I just think it works sort of so well in that way. I agree with that. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That goes back to this idea of like the distillation of what this character is and why it works. Is again, like, this film, what, 2 hours long, very efficient, very swift, but like
Mhm.
it's doing what it wants to do, and it's that Mad Max kind of sort of like, it feels like the maddest of the Mad Max films. Um, And one of the things we said before, like the first two are clearly low budget, but they're doing stuff. The chase scene at the end of Road Warrior is insane. It's brilliant. It's, this is that taken to the next level. But then we have like the more money invested from the third one, which is again studio sort of notes, feedback, all that kind of thing. And you're going like, cool, that's fine, but it's clearly a spec script. The stuff we love, but there's also an oddity to that sort of film. This is like both money and Miller being left alone.
Mm.
Like, this is the best of the scenario. Like, we've talked about auteur cinema before, but this is where they've gone like, yeah, go make them. We know this IP works. We know we can sell this. Go make this film. Here's however much this film cost. And like, George Miller's gone like, cool. I'm gonna do all this. Um, I think the budget was 150 million. This is the most expensive of all of them, and that's a big budget. So for him to be
Yeah.
given that and then going, the other thing I've just read, I was just looking at the notes and stuff. He had 470 hours worth of footage when he
Yeah.
finished, and then they got it down to two.
Yeah. No, I mean he probably overshot.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
But you can, first of all, kudos to him for getting it down to two.
yeah.
I mean, it is amazing how frequent the 3.5 hour movie is now. Um, and you remember as a kid, like, Casino, Godfather,
Mm,
like JFK, those were two VHS tapes.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
um, those were rare movies. And now they're so long. And the fact that you've got all this money, these extras, all this time spent, and it really is, again, that idea of like distillation.
Mm,
Everything feels like, no, we're just gonna present you with not just the best, most essential stuff to carry this narrative forward, but also we're gonna even speed it up and put filters on it, to enhance that
mm,
color. Um, and there's just so much love, frame by frame, in this movie. It's like this
yeah.
is a movie that knows the frame is the key thing, right? It all, like there's an attention to every frame here that just is missing from so many other films that have a bigger budget.
Mm.
But I can imagine, how crazy the studio must have felt. Like, you gave this dude $150 million to disappear into the desert, strap actors onto the side of big rigs, and drive them, at 90 miles an hour while stuntmen are swinging onto
Yeah.
them, on poles and shit. Like, what have we done?
Oh, this
What?
had the potential to be like, the next Apocalypse Now or Island of
Mm.
Dr. Moreau. Like this was like we gave them a big budget, they disappeared. They literally drove people insane. Like, this had the
Yeah,
potential to be one of those documentary stars where like this is how George Miller killed Tom Hardy.
yes. Well, I can imagine the documentary. Like, it seemed like a good idea at the time,
Yeah.
bringing back the Mad Max franchise. 150 million was a lot of money, but he talked them up. And then the problem started.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit.
Mel Gibson kept turning up on set in costume.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
Marlon Brando came back from the
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the differences that one of the things that I want to point, I think is worth noting about the budget and about that thing you've said about the ability to focus on it frame by frame is 75%, 80% of what is there to be focused on in frame was practical. It's there, it's filmed. That 170 hours has got stuff on. There are cars flipping, there are big, dust clouds coming off the back of things. There are, people climbing all over the war rig. There's Nathan Jones stood, 7.5 foot tall, wherever he is, or like strapped in leather and, doing his bit on the front of a truck. Like it's there. Like it's in that shot. It's not like they've gone, right, well, this bit is going to be shot in green screen, and so we're going to have to add in, um, you know, vibration things within the sort of things. Then we're going to have to add in a background, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Like, there's not layering of CGI. There's literally this thing of just saying like, oh yeah, it was this, and then we're going to tidy it up or do this in frame, and then off we go. And I think that's what's critical to this is the reason you're able to focus on each of those scenes or the way that it was edited together is because it's there. And then they can go, right, now we've got like, I don't know, let's say a working print was 4 hours or 3 hours, whatever it was. Right, now we're going to sort of really cut it down and we can focus in on those things and we can add in the special effects and the CGI and the filters and the music and so on and so forth. Like, that allowed him to do that. You can't do that with like Guardians of the Galaxy. You can't do that with those because it's like, right, we filmed all this on a third of a set. The rest was all green screen. And,
Yeah.
And because of the timescales we have on those things, we have to tell them how long the edit's going to actually be so they can do the filming. We can't come back and then add stuff in later, or you can, but it's going to cost a lot more money. So it kind of feels like you go, yeah, your reason you can add all this stuff in to make it visually sumptuous in this way is simply because it was there to film, it was there to do. So
Yeah, and when you see what was spent on CGI, you see shots where you're like, oh, this is the same shot. It doesn't have the rock formations there. They added the rocks with CGI and they made the sky look prettier, and it's like, right, like the all the crazy shit is all practical, it's getting that setting right, getting that sky to look so pretty. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that is sort of, and I mean, they're adding dust and, removing wires and stuff like
yeah,
that too. I mean, I shouldn't, pretend that, every single thing with the cars is not CG, but they're using it to enhance what's there.
yes,
And so it does have to still go through this, CGI phase, but, as you say, like that raw material, you still see what it looks like, right? You still see 90% of that shot. You can get the feeling for that shot. It just isn't quite in the right place. The sky doesn't match, we're going to add some dust here, it's literally digital enhancements rather than, there's Anakin talking, in a void, to just, something that's going to become Jar Jar Binks,
exactly. And I think that's sort of where this film was able to excel that you just can't do in those other things. So again, well done to George Miller for being able to pull that off. To be like, yeah, we're going to go full practical. What have you got? 70 cars, 30 motorbikes, and I'm going to do this and this. Amazing, fair play. Um, I do want to sort of bring the story sort of to a culmination because there's something I want to sort of talk about. We said this is not Max's story. Max is just literally he comes in. He doesn't even get like a resolute. He just leaves at the end. Like I'm assuming he might get his interceptor back because it's still there at Immortan Joe's place. But he sort of leaves. They return to the Citadel, and Furiosa is to take over. Right, that seems to be the case. But one of the things they're not the character I'm not that bothered by, in the sense of you're following them. Um, and we find out that Furiosa is looking for redemption. She's been looking for an opportunity to do this for a while. One of the things I'm looking forward to with her film is like how did she get into this situation where she obviously allowed the breeding program to be taking place. But the character that I find most interesting in their art is Nux.
Hmm.
Because he starts like he's the one he's got Max strapped to the front of his car. He is all in as a war boy. Like he is there to be. He's dying. He knows he is dying. He's got two growths on him that he has named. But and he says like he says, I don't want to die weak. I want to die on the Fury Road. I want to die epic on the Fury Road. And at one point, he has a way onto the truck, and he says it to Immortan Joe, and Immortan sort of says to him, if you pull this off, I personally will carry you to the gates of Valhalla. And he sprays his face with the chrome, and he sets him off, and he balls it up because he's got a chain attached to him, and he falls over. And the line that Immortan Joe has, he just says mediocre, and then drives off. Like what an amazing insult! Just like not terrible, just mediocre. But beyond that breaks Nux, like the humiliation and the embarrassment. Like he feels like that's it. He's let down his ruler, his master, his god, whatever. And then there's this sort of slow turning of the character where he sort of like he gets to talk to one of the
redhead,
yeah, capable her name is, played by Riley Keough. They talk, they share these ideas, and she starts to bring him round. Sort of like he starts to sort of contribute and sees himself sort of helping the group. And it's this sort of it's not instant. It's not it's not particularly slow, but there's this unbrainwashing of him starting to realize that like actually I could be part of a different group. I can actually contribute without having to do all this craziness. And he's said like witness, you've had all this start at the beginning. But when he is going to, he willingly sacrifices himself at the end to save them. And it's the fact that when he shouts, he still calls witness, but he points at capable for her to see it because he's obviously fallen in love with her and stuff. And it's kind of like I was watching this time, I was like, oh my God, I've never really given this much thought because I'm so in the moment of all the action that like this is where it stands out to me. And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of heartbreaking, but it's also like this is what this film's about. He gets to die epic on he gets what he wants. He gets to die epic on the Fury Road, but doing something good.
for different people.
Not for Morton, but like he takes it all out and thought. So I really like how like we've said before about how tight scripts can be because there's not a great deal going on in this. Like they can give people certain redemptions and stuff, and it works well. Like Max regains his humanity. He's engaging with civilization again for whatever what it is. Furiosa gets her sort of redemption for saving, and she gets to sort of rebuild the green place with the many mothers. And Nux got to do, got the death he wanted. That sort of almost like in a Klingon way, but like for good. I was just like, oh wow, this is really kind of like this works on a narrative really well. Actually, it's not just a crazy chase. There's so much in here that works in that way that I was really watching this time. I was like, yeah, it made me love the film more than just for the action and the sort of the spectacle.
Yeah, I think that for me, the Knox arc feels a little abrupt. He has that conversation with the the
Capable.
wife,
Mm.
capable. And I kind of can buy that they would have this little conversation and not kill each other or restrain each other,
Yeah.
but he seems to just kind of like go along with the rest of the group. And like you say, like he wants to feel helpful. But I wish there were kind of more unbrainwashing stuff
Mm.
there. Um, he just seems to have fully joined their squad at some point, and that it feels a little abrupt to me. Um, on the other hand, I agree with you about these other arcs, and it's worth pointing out that like Furiosa, her arc, we know that she, obviously was part of the infrastructure, the power structure at
Mm.
Immortan Joe's Citadel. Um, there were prequel comics, that kind of had some of her story that she, had originally been one of those kept women. And we'll see, I
How that.
doubt George Miller feels,
Yeah.
uh, like he's got to follow those. But, um, so we'll see. But clearly she has always known, I mean, she was taken prisoner, right?
Hmm.
And so this is her chance to escape and also, take these women with her, right? Which almost seems like it was a little bit of an afterthought,
Yeah.
like she says this will be the one chance to get them out, but she kind of treats them as cargo too initially. Um, and it's not 100% clear how important getting them out is to her, um, except that she's going to be able to arrive, with people at the, who she does want to help, all things considered.
Yeah.
But, when you see Max strapped to the front, um, I can't help but think, oh, well, she's helping some people. She's not helping everyone.
Mm.
Obviously, we're seeing through Max, like he's basically a slave
Yeah.
who exists to, have his blood drawn, Um, the treatment of people is terrible and widespread, and she's chosen who to care about. Um, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong what she does,
Mm.
right? But it feels like such a futile gesture against this powerful, society. But her goal is just to flee and get back to the good place, right?
Yeah.
The green place of her childhood. And then, of course, realizes that's gone. I love the shot of the bogs. It's like there's so many just weird shots in this, that for a movie that is so adrenaline filled and everything,
Mm.
like that feels like something totally out of Terry Gilliam with those people like those stick walkers in the bogs. It's like, oh, George Miller's just like, let's go for it. Let's put that shit in there. Like, what's their story? I don't know. I want that side story.
Well, I
Um,
think because you find out that that was the green place and they couldn't sustain it. I almost think that they are some of the many mothers that have tried to stay behind, and that's how they've adapted. Should be really interesting. So it makes it even sadder that she passed them by, um,
yeah.
through their place. You say that one of the things I would point out is that this is a premeditated idea because she's already contacted. There's another clan that sort of lives in the cliffs or in the mountains, and she's made an arrangements with them to give them gasoline. There's a gasoline tanker on the back of the tanker, back of the war rig, and so the idea was to bring that to them. So she, as a sort of like as a to pay sort of passage through their territory.
Gotta
So
pay
she,
the troll toll.
yes, that's it. Yeah. So she has already had like something. She's put things in place to allow her, or at least the war rig, to pass through this territory. I feel there is premeditation in them to her taking them, but I kind of feel like, as you say, the film softens her. Like she starts hardened in like, um, this is the goal, and I can't sort of focus on, I can't be soft. I've got to focus wholly on achieving this goal. Um, and because you see that when she fights, she meets with the the older women from the place, and they tell her like it's gone. This is it. She just collapses and screams. The frustration and the sort of the futility of the gesture. So But I get what you're saying. Like, it's not. Yeah, she's not saving everyone because she's not saving all the people down below the bottom either, is she? This isn't the people escaping from the drilling sort of place in Max in Road Warrior. This is this is a bit more. This is a bit more beyond Thunderdome with the sort of like the kids looking for the Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland. This is a bit.
Or just a tiny fraction of those kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Going off. Right. So I mean, there's no revolution here, right?
No.
I mean, this is just an escape attempt, but then with Max realizing like, look, there's just salt flats out there, and sort of realizing, well, this whole chase has also been an opportunity to draw them out. There's nowhere to go. Like, it's one of these sort of military decisions that's like, no, you kind of have to stage a revolution at this point, right? Like it's us or them. Like there's nowhere to go that's got water. And we actually have a shot at this. And so it becomes a kind of like accidental revolution. And I really like that. I really like this evolution of her character from somebody who is broken because she's spent decades away from the green place, and I think it's her mom, we learned, died 3 days in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a terrible story there, which maybe we'll see, but no, I do really like this evolution of this kind of hard-bitten person who has no hope of leading a revolution to somebody who literally turns around and winds up accidentally, it's not her intent, but saving all those people and being able to become Immortan Furiosa if she wants,
which is possible. That might be it.
Yeah.
From an Imperator to an Immortan. And that's it. Like, she's taken out the two leaders of Bullet Farm and Gastown, so like, yeah, she could take those on as well, and that maybe it becomes a kingdom. Maybe the sequel that we want to see is that. I don't know. There is more. There's so much sort of here, but it's not needed, is it? Because Max leaves this story. If we were to have the next Mad Max film, it's just, Max stumbling into somebody else's story or another place's story. Could you do that? That's the question. So obviously comes in. We are going to be going on. The next episode obviously going to be us talking about Furiosa, the Mad Max saga. But could you do another Mad Max film after this? Does this typify the Mad Max thing? Could you do another Mad Max film?
Well, they're going to. There is supposedly at least a plot outline for Mad Max: The Wasteland. So they had a lot of material from this that they did not use, and that's sort of morphed into the Furiosa prequel, and apparently that Mad Max: The Wasteland is not dead. So, yeah, of course you can. I mean, and of course there are all these side stories you can tell. I mean, I want to see, I mean, hell, get Terry Gilliam himself to do one of them. I mean, you could do that. Tell a weird little side story there. Yeah, I'd love to see it. I was going to joke that 2 years after this movie ends, the post-credit sequence is like the brides have killed Furiosa in her sleep, said, you didn't really care about us, now we can be in charge. We were taught, exploitation personally at the Imperator's hands, or, Morton Joe's hands. And 2 years later, they're like crucifying people against the cliff face. It's worse than ever. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
That's it. One thing I would say, just about there are opportunities to do more. George Miller's going to be 80 next year. So if you're going to do it, like, you want to be doing it sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think that let's see. I would love to see more. I think one more could be done. Wasteland sounds interesting. Let's see.
Yeah.
Anyway, any final thoughts then on Mad Max Fury Road?
This is not my favorite movie. I don't even know if this is my favorite Mad Max movie. Um, but I think it's a titanic accomplishment.
Mm,
Um, we were talking beforehand of kind of like, movies that get the Oscar for um, what they're doing and the story of their production as much as,
the
what the
end
movie
product.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Titanic being an example,
Mm,
Lord of the Rings, another example. Um, you know, this is a movie that should be understood
yeah.
in that category. I mean, this is a touchstone, and I think that I always think of this film more than any other when I think of that stripped down narrative of like, cut the word balloons in the comic, like you don't need it. Uh, get to the point. Um, you don't need all the characters to sit around the campfire in the desert and have a 5-minute conversation. Get rid of it.
Mm. No, I agree. This works. The fact that I think we keep coming back to it, this is like a distillation of a concept, isn't it? This is cool. We've taken the idea of Mad Max, we've run it through a blender. This is what we've got. This is it now. We've filtered out all the other stuff we don't want. This is how it's going to work. I think it works perfectly in that sense. I do really enjoy this film. It's not a film I come back to frequently though, because I think there's, you know, because that lack of plot sometimes I'm like, yeah, yeah, I can sit back and have it on, but if I'm going to dive into something, I need something else. But it is an immense feat. It looks incredible. The stunts are fantastic. I think it's just an incredible sort of achievement for what it is. Um, but one of the things, just looking back at the sort of the whole series, I mean, the closest comparison, this is comparable to Road Warrior, really. However, I would say each of the films that we've had are different films. Like, it's not like they've gone, oh yeah, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. Like, it's not. This is not like a franchise. Yeah, this isn't Police Academy where they're like, right, same people, different, weird setup or whatever. Like, this is
Or
each
even
film,
Die Hard.
or even Die Hard. Yeah, we've got a
Yeah.
concept and we're going to stick to it. Each film is incredibly different from the last film. Um, in so many different ways. Like, the fact that they've tied them together, and I think, if we use our head canon, we can tie this one in as well. But that kind of gives you license to say, like, yeah, but we're not tied to the Fury Road formula. We're going to do something else. I want to do something different now with the sort of like, okay, this is the last one. Whatever Wastelands is, cool. Do something in Wastelands. It could be a race movie. Instead of a chase movie, it's going to be a race movie. Like, right, to survive this, you've got to get across the wastelands, or whatever. Or it could be Gladiator kind of movie. It could be anything. You can. That's the thing with Mad. Like, the only thing you really need in a Mad Max movie is the cars. The cars are a big part of it, as long as they appear in it at some point. But beyond that, the setup and the format, like, you could literally redo if you wanted to in any of these formats. Like, if you wanted to do, it's ballsy to do, but you could go, right, I'm going to remake Fistful of Dollars. We're going to remake you Jimbo, but with Max
Mm-hmm.
and cars. Like, instead of, it would fit the narrative. You could do it. He goes into a place, two warring gangs. Max starts playing them off against each other to just,
Mm-hmm.
you just remake it in the future. Like, it could be, in fact, that could be really cool. But you could do that with Max. It's incredibly flexible. Um, and you just change out the shootouts in some cases, and you have a big chase at the end. Whatever. Um, I think it's possible, and that's why I think I kind of love this franchise. Going back and watching it, I'm like, yeah, this franchise is actually really cool. Like, there's so much like nuttiness going on, but like every single film feels like a project, like a passion project. Like, they've gone, yeah, we're going to give it our all for what we could, for the money we've got and the people we've got. We're going to give it our all, and we're going to go like, mad. And you go, cool. I'm all right. I appreciate that and I support that. So, um, yes, which makes me more excited for Furiosa.
Yeah, me too. And we sort of have said it before, but I mean, um, you and I are sort of fans of Alien and
Mm,
Predator and
mm,
Terminator and these sorts of franchises that don't quite get as much respect as others. And even stuff like Rocky and Die Hard and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I mean, but movie for movie, what beats Mad Max?
Yeah, I honestly think that now. This is one where I was literally thinking this the other day. I was like, as I watched this, I was thinking, what other franchise can I put up against this? Where I'm like, every film is, interesting or something in this way, or I could stand up and go, yeah, every film in this is sort of good. And I really struggled. I was like, okay, there's a few, maybe I'd probably sort of throw in. I don't know, like you say, maybe the Man with No Name kind of films I
Yeah.
really like. Um, there's very few that sort of hold up in that where all of them are that you know I don't know. It's kind of hard because these provide such different things um, that you you're able to sort of go, oh yeah, but if you watch Mad Max, it's a low budget. I mean, it was apparently one of the most successful indie films of all time for the longest time. And you go, okay, well, how are you gonna follow that? Well, you wait, watch Road Warrior, and you
Hmm.
go, that's a very different film. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Um, I do think things like I do think Evil Dead, to me
Yeah.
at least, is probably is comparable. Um, again, in a similar way, where you've just got Sam Raimi just going like, right, wait, I'm going to do this now, and now we're going to do this, and then even as they've passed it on to the last two, they're like, oh, we're really going to try and make you feel uncomfortable, and we're going to sort of go, So yeah, I don't know. There's a few, but this stands out in the best way, and it makes me excited again for Furiosa. Um, to see what it is they're going to do. I mean, just looking at the posters and the advertising, I was sold before they even came out, but more so now. Anyway, that's what we'll have next week. We will in the next episode. We'll be bringing that to you in the next episode. And hope fingers crossed, but you'll find out how we feel about it. And then beyond that, that's it. We're off into the wasteland and all kinds of apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic fun to be had. And we might even we'll see what else sort of pops up as we go along. Uh, but for
Sounds good.
now, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget we've just finished our inter-season stuff. Go back and check all our pre-seasons. We've got all different kinds of different seasons. We've covered a 50s block. We've gone back as far as the early 30s, 1930s for film. We've got almost a century worth of film covered, and we've done Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, Westworld, and Black Mirror as all our inter-season sort of specials, and a whole bunch of stuff. We now have on our Patreon as well, Trekking Through the Twilight Zone, support episodes where we've done sequels, cycles, short films, all those kinds of things. So much stuff on there as well as all different bits and pieces that I've done as well. So for now, though, I've got to say, go check this out and leave a review as well. If you like what we're doing, leave a review. Let us know what you think of these. Are you excited for your Furiosa? Be interested to see what people say. Anyway, for now, Julian, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, this has been a treat for me, Scott.
Yeah, this has been
It's
good.
been great talking to you about these too.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Mad Max. It's been a great franchise for this one. And but for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we shall see you on the next episode.